So welcome, guys. I'm here with Neriman this morning. Neriman's one of our clients who's been doing intermittent fasting for, how long have you been doing it for, Neriman?
Well, since last August. So how long's that? That's good 9 months now.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
okay. So Neriman's been doing it for a little while, and she's found it to be quite effective. It's really fit her lifestyle. Just to show you guys a picture of Neriman. This is her before and after, if you can see that. So we can see it, Neriman's had a massive transformation. Not only in her body shape, but just in her overall health, her ability to do things. And we're not saying that intermittent fasting is a magic bullet and that it's the number one thing that created that. There was a number of different factors, but I'll let Neriman explain. But I feel like it's probably an integral part of that transformation as well. So Neriman, if you can just tell us a little bit about how you got started with intermittent fasting, I guess what inspired you to get started with it, and perhaps how you do it, like what your structure is of how long you fast for and how long you, what eating window you use.
Sure. I got started last August when I got back from an overseas trip, and I found that I was really struggling to do things or keep up with things. And even though I was working out and thinking I was eating healthy, I really struggled to lose weight. And I guess my idea of eating healthy was low carbs and lots of salads and protein, but I came across intermittent fasting. I didn't know a lot about it, to be honest. So I came across intermittent fasting when I was actually exploring lap band surgery. So, I was looking, a couple of people I knew had that surgery, and I was looking into it, and I had a couple of people tell me I should consider it. And I was very adamant that there was no way I was going to do that, but I wanted to understand what they were doing, and ultimately they weren't eating. Like, when I got to the bottom of what they did, they weren't eating, and I thought, well, I don't need to have surgery to not eat. I'm strong enough, and got the willpower to do it myself. So I started looking at everything. When you start looking into stuff, things just appear out of nowhere. It's like magic. And I think at that time, Rob, you were posting a lot of stuff on the team Trainerizer app, and I remember our first catch up when I got back, and and I raised that with you, and then we had a great discussion, and then you set me off with all these resources. So that's how the journey started. And I must admit, initially I had no idea in terms of what foods I should or shouldn't be eating, but I pretty much went cold turkey. So I went sort of 16/8 straight off the bat. Pretty much the next day we landed in Australia, and but it took me a little while to kind of work out what foods to have in that window. So what I would do is I would not eat in the morning. I would get up and have a coffee, which was just my normal routine anyway. And then I would have the first meal around midday or thereabouts, depending on work routine. And then I would have a second meal, in and around 7:30. So basically I'd be done by 8 p.m. But then over time, I refined and got an understanding of the quantity of carbs I should be having. And I basically started tracking food for a little bit to understand the carb amount in each of the different foods, so that I could then figure it out. But yeah, it's been a great journey for the last 9 months, and I'm straight back onto it.
Awesome. So just to delve into it a little bit, and maybe for the guys that might not know what we mean by 16/8, what we're talking about is 16 hours of not eating, so no food, and only eating within an 8-hour window. And so Neriman, you were just pretty much having, like, eating at midday and then last meal at 8. So were you only having the 2 meals, or were you having something in between that time as well?
To be honest, I would try and not eat as late as 8, but it depends on work schedule. So it was always somewhere between 6:30 and 7:30 would be the last meal. Initially, I was, probably having, some almonds or some yogurt or some strawberries or something as a snack in between. But then the more and more I did it, I realized that wasn't really necessary. So it ended up and it still is now very much 2 meals a day. But there were occasionally, I have tried occasionally doing a 24-hour fast and just having the 1 meal a day. So I guess I've experimented quite a lot in that 9-month window of what works and what doesn't.
Yep. Yep. And how have you found, I guess, body composition, energy levels, and just your overall health, specifically relating to the fasting?
So the huge difference for me was, I would very often I would snooze on the couch after a meal, and barely finish a movie, and then even though I'd get a decent amount of sleep in the morning, I'd wake up quite tired. That was my big issue as well. I felt like I was in a rut. What I really found intermittent fasting helping me with was full of energy. So waking up in the morning with energy, not falling asleep in the evenings on the couch, but also not tossing and turning as much in bed or getting up to go to the bathroom. So that was the interesting part, was that the sleep and the sleep quality was a lot better than previously. And I know that because I wear a Garmin and I track it. So if you look at the average deep sleep I was getting before, it was barely an hour, whereas now I'm kind of averaging 3 hours. So that's made a huge difference in the energy levels.
Yep. And you said that you went straight into the 16-hour fasts. Did you find that challenging? So would you normally have, what would have, previous to doing the fasting, what would you have normally done? Like, what time would you have eaten when you woke up in the morning?
Normally I would do a workout in the morning and then eat something after a workout. So typically, it would be, especially working from home, it would have been somewhere around the 8:30 mark,
Yes.
and then it would have been, a mid-morning snack like a piece of fruit, and then it would have been a lunch, and then it would have been probably another piece of fruit or yogurt or something, and then dinner. And that was quite stressful in terms of trying to organize all that food and make sure you had the healthy snacks and you had the healthy foods. Whereas I guess when I went cold turkey and I went straight into it, it, I found it quite easy to get to 12 o'clock because
Yep.
I am busy, and it was almost like have the black coffee, get stuck into work, a few meetings, and before you know it, it's 12 o'clock. So it was more of a mind over matter. So it wasn't really that I was hungry. It was more that, it was a habit. So it was just a habit to go and get granola or, a piece of toast or whatever it might have been. And I think when you just start changing those habits one by one, you don't really need it or crave it or feel like it anymore.
Yeah, I agree. I think, you almost get hungrier when you start eating early. When I first started doing fasting, I'd I'd normally have breakfast at like 5:30 in the morning, because then I'd be working until 10 or 11 in the morning, so I didn't have an opportunity to eat. And then by the time it was 10 or 11 when I'd finished training clients, I was starving. And then when I started fasting, I wouldn't eat anything, and then I'd get to 10 or 11, and I wasn't even hungry, and then I'd be fine to do a workout and not even think about the food as much. So it's quite interesting how and it's got to do with the insulin, as we've discussed before, that the insulin sort of triggers that hunger once you start eating. But it's I speak to different people, and some people do they go straight into the 16/8. Some people build it up over time, and I guess that's an individual thing. But it can certainly help if you're occupied. If you're sitting around not doing anything, like it's always, I find it a bit harder on the weekends to do, as opposed to during the week, because if, like you said, if you're working from home and you're starting to do your activities, and then you look at the time, like yesterday, literally I had a really busy day, and I had to bring my mum to the hospital at like 1:30, and I looked at the time, I was like, I haven't eaten today. Like, it just occurred to me. I hadn't even thought about it, and I was like, oh, and I'm not really even that hungry. So yeah, it's interesting how it works like that. And do you ever
Absolutely.
feel like, on some days that it's harder to fast, like that you feel a bit hungry or you get cravings in those fasting windows?
Look, I think the first 2 weeks was really hard. I'm going to admit, like the first, and I do vividly remember it. It's because it's something new, you haven't done it, so you're not sure whether you're doing it right or wrong. I did get headaches, I did get a bit of brain fog, but it was like, no, I'm going to stick through. I'm going to stick through. I'm going to stick through, and it did get better. Look, to be honest, it's become more of a lifestyle for us, because my partner does it as well now. He didn't first 3-4 months. He didn't. I was doing it, and it was hard then because people around you are having breakfast, and especially on the weekend, and then you're find stuff to keep yourself occupied. So it is easier when your partner or your family start doing it with you. It's now become more of a lifestyle for both of us, which makes it really, really easy because we both have our coffee in the morning, and then we get to midday, and one of us starts the prep. So it just becomes part of our normal routine. Where it gets difficult is, I guess, family events or celebration events or whatnot. That's where it does get difficult. But then that's very occasional. That's not every day.
Yep.
So I think you just deal with that and then get back on straight away soon after.
And do you do it every day, Neriman, or do you do it some days? Do you have like a schedule, or I do it on these days, or do you do it more intuitively? You feel like eating some days earlier, other days you don't feel like eating as early?
To be honest, I've been doing it every day, and the only time I haven't done it is on this recent trip. So I went overseas recently, and I found it quite difficult to do it. So I pretty much didn't do it at all on our trip overseas. But then the minute we got back, straight back into it the next day. I think I've done the opposite. So there may have been some days where I've tried to test myself to see if I can go further. So like an 18 hours or a 20 hours or a 24 hours. And I've kind of picked a day where I'm really, really busy and I know I'm busy, to try it on those days just to see how I feel and whether, and it's amazing how you can go for 24 hours without thinking about food. And even when it's time to eat, you're like, oh, okay, I should get some food into me, but it's not like you're starving or you're feeling for it. And I've picked those days where we've been on the road or we've been really busy and I can just keep myself occupied. I think it's harder if you're just in and around the fridge or you're in and around people that are having food, because then you're feeling like you're missing out or you're being deprived.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. It is really a mental thing. Quite often we eat for different reasons. Like the longest I've done is like a 36-hour fast, which was sort of like, essentially it's one whole day without eating. So, I ate the night before, went the whole day without eating, and then, ate the next day. And the thing that occurred to me was that there's so many times when you go to eat, when it's not necessary, it's just out of habit. It's just out of conditioning because other people are having something. It's not actually that you feel like you really need it. So it can be a little bit, it's a little bit of a mind over matter thing sometimes, for sure.
Absolutely, but I think what you with doing fasting is that it's actually okay. There's this mindset thing of, oh my God, I need to eat. It's breakfast time, lunchtime, dinner time. And we never go without food long enough to realize that, to tune into your body. Mm-hmm. And I think what intermittent fasting has enabled me to do is really tune into your body to say, am I really hungry? Or, should I be having a bottle of water and then just seeing whether I'm still hungry? So I think it's just seeing, testing and experimenting to say, well, how do you even tune into your body, to listen to your body as to what do you need? And we've been, I think we've been conditioned with so many things over the years of what we should and shouldn't be doing, that, we've got it ingrained in us of we should be eating fruit and we should be eating, we should be eating yogurt and we should be eating low fat and we should be eating, smaller portions and more frequently and all the rest of it. So it's really hard to undo that. But it's giving yourself the space and experimenting, I think, is key.
Agreed. And what advice would you give someone who's perhaps thinking about doing intermittent fasting, experimenting with it? Is there any mistakes that you've made along the way, or things that just pieces of advice that you would have for anyone?
Look, I guess everyone's different, and everyone's family situation and work situation is different. So it's really about trying to work out what works for you. And just because one thing works for one person doesn't necessarily mean, so for instance, there's lots of research saying that you should have your last meal before 6 or whatever the case. And that's just not possible for me with the work I do.
Yes.
So it's okay. It's okay. You just adapt your day, based on what works for you, based on your lifestyle, your hours of work, your family. So I would say it's just really about, if you're going to give it a go, it's figuring out, and is it 14? Oh, God, I'm going to do the maths now. Is it 14:8 or is it 6? So no, 14:10 and
Yeah.
16:8 or whatever it might be. Like,
Yes.
pick something, give it a go, get that down pat, and then add another habit. So it would be the habit stacking that's probably more important. I probably went in full turkey and then, did the whole, I'm going to do this, I'm so strict because I'm so determined, because I was so frustrated that I tried so many things and nothing worked. And I've struggled with weight all my life, and I've probably tried every weight loss program under the sun. But I think the difference this time round was that I wasn't waiting for someone to tell me what to do or give me a list of things I can and can't eat. I think this time around I went quite deep to understand nutrition, understand the composition of food and the macronutrients and insulin. So it was almost like I took the time to educate myself to understand, what things are, and then figured it out. And yes, I had great weight loss, but then I think the lesson learned for me is it's not just about the weight loss, it's about how do you maintain it, how do you understand why things happen to you and your body, and then being able to adapt it. So I would say start with one habit, whatever that habit is. If it's 16:8 2 meals, down pat that first, and
Yep.
then add another habit, which might be water, which might be carb intake, which might be, so don't try and do everything at once, because
Yes.
that could be a bit overwhelming. And then you could easily throw the towel in, because you'd be like, I've been doing it for several weeks and I'm not seeing the results. So it's a long journey, and it's a journey, it's not a destination. So it would be just one thing at a time.
Yeah, and I should point out for the guys listening to this as well that over the years I've had clients that have tried intermittent fasting, and if you don't like, Neriman's made some big changes to her food as well. She's because you're eating within a smaller window of time. She's really focusing on eating nutrient dense food, because essentially you're skipping one whole meal. So you want to make sure when you are eating, you're eating really good quality food and you're getting the nutrients that your body needs. And also Neriman's done, a lower carb approach as well, getting rid of the sugars and the starches and the processed foods out of her diet, which is a big component. I've had guys that have tried intermittent fasting in the past, but they haven't changed their eating, and it hasn't really worked for them. So it's important. It's one component of a lifestyle change. And I think would you agree with that, Neriman? That's an
Yeah,
essential.
100%. And I could easily say that my meals are actually decent sized meals. So it's not like you're skipping and you're just having like a tiny little salad with tuna or whatever it might be. They are proper meals. And like full fat yogurt, full fat cheese. So you're not skimping here and there. But I think the biggest change for me was fruit, to be honest. So, I was probably having a lot more fruit, 3 or 4 pieces of fruit a day. Whereas now I might have 1 or 2 strawberries or berries, and that's about it. So that was a huge change, and that education factor of, well, we've been brought up thinking fruit is very healthy, but it's actually full of sugar. So just understanding the composition was quite important, and then having really good quality protein with every meal, and making sure once again that I wasn't skimping on that.
Yes.
And I have noticed that if I've gone with a smaller meal in the evening,
Mhm.
that I do get hungry next morning, and I've just experimented with that to say, so if I've had leftovers and the portions have just been small or whatever, and I've just made do, I do feel hungrier the next day. So it's your body telling you that you just haven't had enough food the night before to be able to go the fast. Yeah.
It's really a bit of self-exploration, isn't it? Sort of, working, just listening to what your body's telling you, in other words. Your body's
Absolutely.
highly intelligent, and you've just got to sort of learn to interpret what it's telling you. I think that's a big key to it as well. But anyway, look, thanks
Absolutely.
for your time, Neriman. That was fantastic. I think a lot of people will get a lot out of that. Appreciate you spending that time with us, and we'll see you next time at training.
Thanks, Rob. Thank you.